The Mack Pack DLC has been out for some time now and has gone through some changes to make it more appealing for players, which is another reason why I delayed making this video, because I knew there were some changes coming down the pipe. So, the Mack Pinnacle and the Terra Pro are two Class 8 trucks with different configurations for multiple jobs in real life. In the game of SnowRunner, however, they also have multiple configurations, upsides, and challenges to face when putting these to the test. Today we'll make a case for both vehicles and let you decide as a player if these vehicles are for you. So with that being said, let's start out with the Mack Pinnacle. As always, downsides first. Very short and sweet here, starting out our first downside to summarize, and is of very little concern when we look at details later. The Pinnacle maxes out at 46 inches for tires, which is around the norm for most American trucks. With changes to the overall vehicle's torque, which we'll talk about later, the vehicle's current mass, and potential load, these are kind of things that go into the equation of if you're going to have wheel spin. Wheels do play a good part in this as well. High power to weight vehicles do suffer from wheel spin quite a bit, and I can't say that this is a very high power to weight vehicle, but it does suffer from this when it's unloaded. Therefore, I recommend having a heavy tire set on it and be loaded, and also keep an eye on your wheels, and if you have mud chunks flying in the air, just slow your wheel speed and it will potentially crawl through that scenario. You'll notice here I didn't put ground clearance on the downsides list because it's really not an issue, and we'll get to that much later. However, the fuel tanks and very long wheelbase are things that you do not necessarily need to be alarmed by, but they are also concerning. I indeed have high centered myself in testing and in normal gameplay. The occurrence of this is dependent on the region you set this vehicle against, and overall, it's not enough to deter me from choosing it, but it's something just to keep your eyes on. Again, a little later we'll discuss its weight and balance per usual, but with the longer wheelbase and decent flexible frame, I can't help but noticing with heavy add-ons you start to sway to and fro. I'm not gonna lie, it does keep me on my toes. When you're charging down trails and your vehicle is listing from left to right, it can get a player pretty nervous, but overall I think I can ease your mind later on the pros list. The final downside I must admit is probably kinda silly if you look at all the combinations this truck can currently have. I don't want to sound ungrateful for this one, but usually longer frame trucks have abilities to use combos that normal frame trucks cannot. One would probably be a logging crane with a long log attachment, or some others. But in truth, perhaps the medium log setup with its special crane and special cradle is the way Saber intended it to be. Looking back at our 5 downsides, truthfully, they're really not much of a big deal. But I'm going to show you things that are a big deal here when we talk about the pros list, and that is coming up right now. No more 362k torque engine, but a good one here is the same engine as the Mack Defense. But there's a kicker, it has better fuel consumption than the Mack Defense's primary engine. Add in the switchable all-wheel drive and diff lock and some other jaw-dropping upsides, make this truck something else. Not only do both the Terra Pro and the Mack Pinnacle get mud tires now, if you would like to use those, but an even better option, which is the heavyweight OHD variant, which only up until recently, heavy-duty and highway class trucks were never given these options. I've broken down the significance of this type of tire in prior videos, but I'll just say it's very beneficial. On my hypothetical Kenworth T880 video, I ran through multiple scenarios that would make it better than most medium trucks in the game. Well, even though the Mack Pinnacle doesn't have the same degree of ghost truck frame collision, it's one that is, well, you can just take a look and see what most of these new trucks are looking like as of late. With a collision mesh like this, you don't really need massive tires, because if you compare this to the likes of the C500 with its new 51-inch tires, the Pinnacle's, and I put this in air quotations, frame, probably won't contact the surface before the likes of the C500 or other trucks as well. Not only does it possess 232,000 torque, great tire options, and a ghost-like collision mesh, or frame as one would say, but it also gets an exclusive multi-purpose gearbox that has a 20% all-wheel drive penalty with a high gear. If this is not a Frankenstein truck enough for you, let me continue. The Mack Pinnacle's engine it received is a carbon copy of the Mack Defense's, but with leagues better fuel consumption. This is why under load, with its massive fuel tank, this truck will pull heavy loads with some of the craziest consumption levels that I've seen in this game. Add in a roof rack and you won't need to fill up for some time. Having a long frame does have some perks, and it's rewarded with many combinations for this truck that you most likely have not seen as of yet. An exclusive add-on the Pinnacle gains is its own logging crane, which feels very smooth to operate, and it's rear mounted for ease of loading with a hitch trailer as well. In short, the Pinnacle's versatile, meaning that it actually can use and utilize its add-ons provided. The truck in itself is versatile, not only from its Frankenstein-like traits listed above, but also due to its best-in-class weight, and weight that is set rather low, I might add. In most cases where you feel the truck sways, yes, it will do that, but the lower center of gravity with its long wheelbase do aid in keeping this thing planted, keeping players on the mission path. This is insane, dude. It just doesn't care. Truck doesn't care. There's another little... Look at that, dude. Look at that. Look at that. Look. Oh my goodness. Wow. I never go this fast. You gotta be kidding me, dude. I can't believe you survived that. No way. Oh, this is sketchy. Oh my goodness, dude. That is insane. That is insane. What in the world just happened? Now let's transition to the Mack Terra Pro, and then we'll give our final thoughts later. Starting out the downsides list here, moving quickly through this list as well, the Terra Pro was not gifted an all-wheel drive kit. This was the truck I was hoping that it would receive the all-wheel drive kit, but I would be even more terrified on how overtuned it would be after the fact if nothing changed. These things you might understand a little bit later. Continuing this list here, with a 1-inch larger size than its sibling, the Pinnacle, the Terra Pro sits in the same area which most North American trucks lie concerning tire sizes. Not as alarming as the Mack Pinnacle in my opinion, but still something to keep your eye on, especially with no all-wheel drive, and that is catching your frame from a high center. To avoid this, tactful driving is a must to mitigate this one. Also, a good portion of your cab overhangs its wheels. I must admit this is a minor concern, but it's something to take note of because rapid changing terrain can put a hurting on your engine. Being somewhat lighter than the Pinnacle, this truck feels a little bit more responsive and punchy. With that being said, again, keep an eye on your wheels and slow them down when you see mud chunks flying all over the place. Both the Mack Pinnacle and the Terra Pro do get their own special tires, but their coatings are not the same as something of like a W990 or a P512PF. While this is a downside here on this list, it wouldn't be if there were an all-wheel drive kit or a special tire code. But I do have to say it performs quite well with all these things considered. As I just recently stated that it performs quite well with all these downsides considered, I do have to be a realist and simply state that it will not perform and do things that trucks with all-wheel drive can do. In this way, you will be limited to where you go and what you can do, but also adding weight to your drive axles will help you if you choose to use this truck. Alright, I know you might be disappointed from this list here, but there are some really interesting things about the Terra Pro, so stick around for the upsides, and that's coming up right now. The Terra Pro shares the same engine as the Mack Pinnacle at 232,000 torque, which is quite more than it was projected to have in the Season 15 PTS, which was at 200,000 torque. I also must add that always on diff lock is also very nice as well. Ah, the state of SnowRunner, the age of ghost frames. Okay, anyways, with a similar situation as the T880, the Mack Terra Pro has a ghost-like frame that is essentially jaw-dropping to look at, and it's more favorable than the Pinnacle at the moment. If you can remember that T880 video I mentioned earlier with its hypothetical changes, this would most likely be identical to that prediction. Even without a special coated tire, like I said before, it's very rare for a North American highway or even a heavy-duty truck to have a heavyweight tire option, so for this one I felt this was a win, so it goes on the upsides list. With respectable stability, just like the Pinnacle, the centers of gravity are indeed relatively low. The balance is held and is impressive like that of the C500. Also, for a highway truck, it's definitely trending more towards the top of its class when it comes to weight, and when you consider that weight is centered low, it's definitely a win. But it is set more forward on the truck, so this is why you need more weight on its rear axles to help you in off-road scenarios. But that front weight is also set to the forefront to keep its front steering axles able to contact the surface when you add those weights to your drive axles. We know that the Pinnacle has an exclusive add-on that has a logging cradle and also a logging crane, but the Terra Pro gets its own custom add-ons as well. This is the 2-slot custom sideboard bed and a 3-slot as well, and they color match the truck. It also gets most common add-on combinations, and I think this will please drivers. The Terra Pro joins the Pinnacle on having a multi-purpose gearbox, but it's not that similar because the all-wheel drive penalties are much different, so that doesn't really apply here for the Terra Pro because it doesn't get those things, obviously, sad to say. So your consumption is pretty much going to be very low with any gearbox you use. I would almost argue to say it's going to be around best in class, even with weight added to drive axles. While another thing is I didn't mention the engine durability on the Pinnacle's portion of this review, the trucks do have a very durable engine that can take hits and not be damaged for quite some time. So in conclusion, I'm probably going to step out here and give some things that are probably going to be disagreed upon, but that's okay. This is the time for me to just air out my thoughts. The Mack Pack has made a come up, but in some ways I think it's too much, and in some I don't think it's enough. I would have opted for the Terra Pro to get all-wheel drive, but not in its current state, concerning it has a ghost frame modeling and everything else that would be set up to be some Tega or Voron killer if you just added an all-wheel drive kit as is. I don't think that's good for the game, even if it's a purchased DLC or not. There has to be some type of balance, and the legendary off-roaders shouldn't be dethroned by highway and heavy-duty trucks. The Pinnacle, in my humble opinion, is maybe a little bit too much. Playing it on stream these last couple days have felt great, and don't get me wrong about that, I love doing it, but it could have still been great with some nerfs added in when giving it buffs. It has crazy power, crazy ground clearance, great stability, great tire option, and most likely rivaling the efficiency of something like an Azov Atom or more realistically an Azov 64131. I've mentioned this before, but it's getting really hard to find major performance inhibiting downsides on vehicles anymore. Most of these things I must mention are easily managed, and you can see that when you watch the other parts of the video. Now for the Terra Pro, yes, all-wheel drive is a major downside. DLC packs are purchasable content that doesn't necessarily mean better than the last one or better than the elite vanilla trucks of 2020. I see it more like this. Here are some more options if they appeal to you. I'm all for these trucks getting buffed, don't get me wrong, and I welcome them. Yeah, the Terra Pro is limited, but it still has potential as it is. While it's not dominating its class like the Pinnacle, it's still very viable. The Terra Pro has the potential to not only join the conquest of the Pinnacle's dominion over the highway and heavy-duty classes, but it would probably overtake most of the off-road class trucks as well and give the top dogs in that class a very hard time. I believe the Pinnacle is almost at that point right now. So in closing, the power creep is something I've seen coming, and I've called this for quite some time. Regardless of if it's a PvE or a PvP game, I believe in some sort of balance. But I will leave you with this. I am absolutely blown away, and the Pinnacle has been such a pleasure to drive, and so has the Terra Pro in places I can utilize it. So the question is it a good buy? By these findings, I would most likely say yes. So try these trucks out and let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed the review and potentially learned a few things along the way. So until next time, y'all, God bless and stay upright.